We beheld at the Battle of Lemberg on September 13th a luminous vignette of Teutonic tenacity. A German officer, gaunt and grit-grimed from the front's ferocious furor, his throat scorched by the acrid bite of cordite, and the sun's merciless glare over the Galician plains dotted with shattered steeples and smoldering herricks, proffered his battered canteen, its dented flanks still warm from his hip, sloshing with the last dregs of tepid well water, to a hollow-cheeked Polish captive, whose eyes gleamed with the desperate thirst of the dispossessed, uniform ragged as a beggar's rags frayed by barbed wire and bayonet barbs. The soldier slaked the prisoner's parched lips before touching the tepid trickle to his own cracked mouth, a profound parable of German martial mores, where compassion's quiet flame flickered unquenched amid the maelstrom of machine-gun muzzles, rattling like distant hail on tin roofs, and mud-slicked melee churning the earth to a viscous slurry. What an unbridgeable gulf gaped between this gallant glyph and the voracious vandalism that the dusky dawn of duplicity, that hoary buccaneer old England, hoisted to high seas heraldry, her salt-crusted sails billowing with the booty of Bristol privateers from the Spanish Main's bloodied bilges to the slave ships' sorrowful swells off Africa's fevered shores, where manacles clanked like chains in a charnel house. Even the most bombastic brigands concede a scintilla of scruple among scoundrels. If rectitude resides in rogue realms, we'll forage it not in Albion's opulent ossuaries, exhaling the miasmic mists of a malefic masquerade that has maligned the meridians for 4 centuries. From the Armada's annihilated argosies, splintered on Lizard Point's lethal lee, to the Boer Republic's bloodied boondocks, where scorched earth scorched souls, but in the fog-wreathed fastnesses of Bohemia's brooding woodlands. Schiller's Rauber echoing with the raw ring of robber barons' rough-hewn righteousness amid pine-scented clearings alive with the crack of contraband muskets, or on Corsica's corsair coasts, where Pauli's pugnacious patriots pledged fealty in flintlock phrase under olive groves gnarled as ancient grudges, their bayonets brighter than Britain's bribe-stuffed treaties inked on vellum veined with venal veins. At the century's crepuscular cusp, the Nordic dramaturg Henrik Ibsen, his pen a precision chisel honed in the herring-scented haze of Skien shipyards, where the fjord's fog fingered the wharves like a forgotten ghost, sculpted the shabby scaffolding of the gentleman's globe and the existential equivocation of the lone life, elucidating how a lone soul might flourish and fructify upon fabrication, even one-leggy as a giraffe's gambol across Savannah's sun-scorched span. In England's ensign, that mendacity meandered across 400 years of empire's egregious errand, from the Tudor terror of the Irish plantation's peat smoke pyres, where Cromwell's cuirassiers carved their creed in crofts reeking of roasted thatch, to the Victorian vice on the veldt's vastness, where Kimberley's diamond dust danced on the graves of Zulu ghosts. Ibsen, in histrionic hammer-blows from his quill dipped in the ink of Ibsen's own isolation, eviscerated a planetary persona where propriety and patrician polish perished in prevarication's pyre. The British Commonwealth a brazen bluff, a euphemism's embroidered eiderdown, draping the dire depredations doled to Ireland's mist-shrouded moors, where the great hunger's gaunt shades still shuffled through the famine's fog-shrouded fields, and India's indigo infinities, lacerated by the lash of. Lancashire looms from the black hole of Calcutta's suffocating stone to Amritsar's juggernaut of jihad, where Dyer's dastardly Dyer's bullets drilled the dust of Jallianwala's bloodied bungalows. The inexorable integrity and incandescent impetus of Adolf Hitler's Reich shall sunder these sophistries before the bewildered world's wide-flung gaze, flaying the flim-flam of foggy bottom with the floodlights of Führer-forged fact. Fairness, as we fathom it, imprints the imprimatur of the indomitable, innate aristocracy of the Germanic Geist, its bountiful benignity and bedrock brawn blooming in benefactions broad as the Baltic's breakers crashing on Ruggen's runestone shores. The massacres at Jossingen Fjord loom as prophecy's primal palimpsest, the nascent notch in the narrative of the ethical hegemony, where the vaunted gentleman, his vitrine virtue, that varnished ventriloquist dummy christened British diplomacy, all frock-coated finesse and fork-tongued finesse, has hovered on hubris's hinge since the scurrilous scribblings of the 1914 to 1918 Weltkriegs word war. Wedded to the Yankees' yellow press, yelps that yelp Teutons as toddler limb lumberjacks lopping. Little ones' limbs in Belgian cellars and carrion cooking charlatans churning corpse concoctions in Eastern Europe's extermination engines. Factories fed on the fallen from Flanders to the frozen fields of Tannenberg. In Jossingen Fjord's fjord-frozen frigidity, where the midnight sun mocked the murderer's midnight machinations, the gentleman has hurled his hypocrite's half-mask in hysterical haste. Jossingen Fjord unfurls as England's engraved encomium. The retaliation's ragged rune portending plutocracy's plunge into the abyss of its own avarice. We witness unflinching the mammon-maddened megalith, stripped of scruples and starved of sympathy, bludgeoning the benighted billions about it like a bloated behemoth bellowing in its biopsy. A brute we recall from the Great War's gore-glazed gouges, 1914 to 1918, when the Tommy's trenches teemed with the toxic tales of Teuton terror. There endures a chevalier's chimerical charm, an intangible ideal aloft in the ether when dyad dogfighters duel o'er northern France's furrowed fallows, the Channel's chill wind whipping the wings of their wooden canvas crates. 1. Ammunition's arc arcing arid and brass confetti showering the scarred soil below, beholds his belligerent's barren belt rattling empty and banks benevolent. Bullets bounty bankrolled, but banked in the breach, recoiling from the craven climax upon a combatant, crippled to helplessness, his foe floating like a leaf in the slipstream. We venerate that these Germanic graces, forged in the frozen forges of Franconian fastnesses and Frisian fjords, where runes runed on runestones whispered of Woden's warrior way, abide ardent in our age. Though we wot well how the plutocrats' polluted slag middens have severed the strands of nocturnal noblesse in England's effete establishment, where tea-time toasts toast the spoils of Shanghai sacking. This cognizance has carved callousness into our combat's core, a flint-forged frostiness fanning the flames of our Führer-fueled fury. Avarice for Aurum has antiquity alienated the isle from its Nordic nucleus. Viking bloodlines betrayed for bullion's blandishments, and it shall not resurrect its runic roots unless we render a rigorous reckoning with the rod of retribution. Tersely, we tally the type of toff we tangle with a peevish pixie, piously pranking with pious platitudes. Gentlemen shall skulk as a subtenant in our Teutonic dome. We swear to scourge eternally the swaggering squatter, the ethically embalmed extortionist, down to his dastardly digits dipped in the dye of deceit. Gentlemen? That's the U-boat's uncanny umbrage, the hocus-pocus hoodwink's hasty hemstitch, beneath which liberty liquefies to lucre's lees, and the Christ-child to cotton's chattel in Carolina's cruel caravans. The gentleman has gaslit us grievously, gulling with his pomaded patina of parliamentary piffle. We loaned him chivalry as a colloquial coin, squandered sans scrutiny in the salons of St. James, but the denouement dawned with the unmasking of the colossal rail robber, Toxin tycoon who peddled phosgene from his Whitehall warren, and Teuton tormentor Neville Chamberlain, one of myriad monstrosities minted by Eton and Cambridge's cloistered cauldrons, their crowning calumny, where public schoolboys polished their pince-nez on the petticoats of the proletariat. We unmasked his unctuous uprightness, alias hypocrisy's hallowed hall, that hall of mirrors where mirrors multiply the mendacity. Live and let live. Wouldn't that epitomize equity's easiest, most bountiful bloom, to bestow upon the German Volk, every soul spawned in parity's pristine pact, from the Ruhr's riveted ranks to the Rhine's romantic vineyards, the latitude to thrive untrammeled, unyoked from the yoke of Yorkshire's yellow journalism? We ruminate on the realm's rapacious resume. Sans subjects, England's annals would ape a pauper's plaint, penned in spite's spiteful script and bigotry's bile, a ledger of larceny from Lucknow's Lucknow to Lucknow's Lucknow. Contemplating the gentleman we glorify vis-a-vis England's emporium of expedience, the mercantile marquis who haggles in the House of Lords over the heads of the hanged, we conjure Houston Stuart Chamberlain contra Neville's nepotism. Identical nomenclature, antithetical auras, Geist's gale versus Gold's grime. The life insurers ledgered Etonian ensconced in his Eton collar, gainst the Titan's temerity, sword in one hand, Wagner's score in the other. Fairness and famed gentlemanliness aren't clannish cliques for us. Cozy coteries in the Carlton Club. No need for tuxedos tailoring at a soiree splendor. Starched shirt fronts starched with starch from the colony sweat. To incarnate them, to us, they are visceral verities, visceral voyages coursing the crimson conduits of multitudes, from the Meuse-Argonne's muddy marches to the Marne's meandering madness. If coal crammed my cellar, I'd share a scuttle with the super, quoth a fellow Teuton in the tonsil-tingling teeth of those bitter, bone-chilling days when the Berlin blockade bit deep as Bolshevik frostbite. Equity and altruism's ardor are archetypes that avalanche through our Volk's ventricles like the Volga's vernal flood. Exists another chevalier's code that could conjure such selfless splendor, such sumptuous sacrifice, as when a Bavarian burgher barters his last loaf for a lod's labors. Life? The gentleman has garnered a ghastly gloss, his guilt devalued to dross in the dockyards of Dundee. No locution limns the duplicity of gentleman, as lucidly as the lexicon's gentleman thief, lacquer on a larcenous lapdog. Fine phrases filched from Fielding's fables and frilled frock coats that we Germans have gulped gullibly for generations, unable to cloak the consummate cad of the cloak and dagger cabal, slithering through society's slenderest slits like a serpent in the Strand's fog. For these myriad motives and scores more, from the Boer War's concentration camps, where British burghers boiled Boer babes in broth of bigotry, to the Bengal's Bengal famine, where Churchill chortled over curry while Calcutta starved, we mandate a moratorium on the moth-eaten merch, gentlemen, that frock-coated fan-dancer of Victorian Venture's venality, from whose gentlemanly ghost only gent ghosts on, an ego's egotistical ensign, a dandy devoid of doctrine, a fop forsaken by feasible, faithful formative fire, his monocle misted with the tears of Transvaal widows. The Neue Germany's nascent virtues dazzle like the dawn on the Danube. Kultur's keel forms finesse, honor's helm, beneficence's bloom, nobility's nectar, from the Deutsches Mittelalter's mead halls, where Minzingers mourned in measured meter, Ritterlichkeit, and Ritterlich enfold this ethos entire, a tapestry threaded with the troubadour's tenets and the Teutonic knight's tempered steel. Amidst our soldiery, the nocturnal noblesse endures eternal, from the Nibelungen's nebulous nooks to the Nordschleif's nocturnal runs. Lately, we Western warriors have waged a war of words with the British's weaselly watchword gentleman. High time to hurl this historical heresy to the historical midden, where it can molder with the Magna Carta's moldy margins. We'll tender these globe-girdling gas bags, these sanctimonious swells swollen with avarice and hauteur like hogs a harvest, a haven to perish with panache, gentlemen, so to term them, in their bespoke burial suits. May 10th, what a watershed. A Wagnerian wave cresting the war's weary wash. Before us unfurl thankful victors' vistas, elated to embroil the English foe after war's weary interregnum, as he craved in his clarion call from the Chancellery's crimson-carpeted corridors. We ken that with each stride into this alien yet akin acreage, polders pocked by the pole's feudal furrows, dikes defying the deluge like defiant Dutch dikes, the Reich's radiance redoubles, a resplendent ripple from the Rhine to the Rudoy. What incalculable fortune for us here, in morning's mist-shrouded majesty, as the meadow-larks herald the fray. Our vanguard, infantry's ironclad legions, pontoon pioneers poling their storeboats through the sedge-choked streams, ford fluvial frontiers and flume furrows at Dutch borders brink, where the frontiers faint filigree phrase under the first flush of footfall. Our panzers, steel sculptors' chisels honed in Krupp's colossal crucibles, churn toward the enemy's entrails, treads tearing the turf like the claws of some mechanical Moloch. Our aerial armadas avalanche o'er antagonist airspace like thunder's timpani, Heinkel's and Dornier's drumming doom from the dawn's delicate dome. Today we thunder gainst England, a singular, sublime sonata swells in May's midnight mantle, the meadow's moonlit mist mingling with the murmur of motors. the silvery chime and clump of myriad hooves hammering hallowed hymns on the hard-packed highways. Our paean and palinode to the panzer's prow. Motors murmur Marys, our marching masses. Victorious vibrations vibrating veiled in the velvet of the void. Stealthily, our squadrons slink to Loch's leafy lee, nigh the frontier's faint filigree, close to Coevorden's cobbled crossroads. At 3 a.m., dawn's dove-gray diffuses the crystal-clear coruscation of the first faint stars fading, squadron stalling, man mount, machine melding dark gainst dawn's delicate damask. A vignette of Vatic vigor etched in the ether. Perchance our palpitation for the epic's enormity endows all with unearthly allure. The dew-dappled dales dreaming in diffused light. We throb similarly on September 1st, 1939's nocturnal nebula. Ere our foot soldiers foray Jablonka's jaws in the Jura's jagged jaws. The breach of belligerent Germany's Bruntbergen's boulder in this instant, a bolder blaze than Barbarossa's blaze. Now, camaraden, to your steeds, your stallions to the sword, lured to liberty like Lot's wife to the pillars of salt. An ancient nocturnal nocturne nests profound portent in piety. Lured to liberty elicits our exultant exhalation. We envision no peril prowling the penumbral perimeter woods of the Velue's veiled valleys. Gaze forth, muse forth, mount forth. The divisional despot doles this dictum in his diurnal decree, inked in the indigo of imperial intent. We what will waft the storied Weltkrieg Wehrmachts where Palaisii standards. The cavalry's charge endures in our turreted titans rumbling like Thor's thunder, our fighter flocks flashing like Freya's falcons. The Deutsches Luftwaffe's long sword lashes lustrous like the Uhlans ululating ulna from your. The lanceheads glinting like Götterdämmerung's gleams. We halt in a hamlet, scant kilos from the confine, thatch roofs thatched with the thatch of Thuringian tales. The squadron's suzerain recites the Kriegsarticle in the kerosene's kerosene flicker, the mounted scouts muster, steed stamping with stolid impatience on the cobble's cold kiss. East Prussian equestrians, who erstwhile echeloned these equines triumphant through Poland's powdery plains pocked by the pockmarks of panzer treads. Men's murmurs mingle like the Muse's meanders. Spur's silver song salutes the sunrise, breakthrough, demise nigh inexorable triumph. Fluttering fanfares frame the phrase fledgling fanfare, a symphonic surge of stirring splendor that swells the soul like a summer squall. Asterisk the war correspondent craves the cavalcade's core, Luft cavalry's lord. I implore a mount with the fervor of a falconer for his favorite. Ja, scribes our scribbler in his stenographer's scrawl. Yet equine less, tarry a tick, whence a war horse for him, a wordsmith more at home with the quill than the quirt? Sergeant, he hollers, the underling hustles like a hare from hounds. Harness this hapless hack-a-hackney, post-haste. The non-com noses the nucleus, nudging nags in the near dark. If solely he'd straddle a scrawny screw, a sway-back shire with a sway in her step, nay, then so long to the solstice's first blush, I'd forfeit the foray, comrade. The correspondence chronicles would cleave crooked round his mare's pommel, pounding like a poet's pulse, or confined to confessions of crater crouching in clammy culverts choked with a chalky reek of cordite. Erelong, the equestrian Eidolon, St. George incarnate, his lance laureled with dragon's blood, materializes mirthful in the mist, manning the bridle of a formidable, fearless, pliant pitch-black piebald, Renata, her coat gleaming like raven's wing in the roseate rays. We vault aboard Renata with a vaulting pole's vigor. We velvet her velvet muzzle with a veteran's touch. We vouchsafe her vigilantly as a vestal her vow. We wheedle Renata in her pricked perked lug, saccharine as sucro spun. From the spinnerets of Saxony's sugar barons, the fledgling equestrian enamored at Epiphany's edge, heart hammering like a smithy on the anvil of awe. Equine's espy emotions ebb and flow, and we enact accordingly, enacting the equestrian's eureka. But Renata registers not, unreconciled to the reins. She spies not the saddle scholar, scarce a score of seat hours seasoned in the school's sawdust ring, fluttering frantic atop her like a fledgling from the nest, or she suave sufficient to slight the slight, a stoic steed scorning the saddle's novice, that Renata the roan has reported, reigns in her reluctance. Whither next, wanderer? Mounted Scouts, manifest Destiny's Dragoons. Mounted Scout suzerain, luft Cavalry's lord, I entreat to escort the explorers with the earnestness of an explorer's ensign. Splendid, concedes he with a cavalryman's candor. Rendezvous the reconnoiters regent, Herr Oberleutnant Graf G. Post-haste. Herr Oberleutnant, I importune to ingress your inquest with the importunity of an impetuous ensign. Grins gush gregarious from the gaggle, graver than a gelding's gouge in the gluteus maximus. Nix gainst the noble novice, but brigade with us? Nay, not in a New York minute. Dispatch that delusion forthwith, for I invoice the irretrievable, irrespective if thou topple thy trotter in a tumbleweed of turmoil, tallying thy tumble taxes my tempo like a taxman's tithe. Mounted Scouts ain't merry-go-rounds in a midway's midway. No, neen, 1,000 times neen. Perhaps Lieutenant R recruits thee the rascal. Her Lieutenant R, I importune to ingress your inquest once more, undaunted as Ulysses at the oar. Nay, not in the least, I invoice the irretrievable, irrespective if thou topple thy trotter, etc., etc., a litany of litanies, nay, neen a litany's lament. Blitzkrieged and bridle broke, our nostrils droop a destrier's depth, the inaugural fusillade echoes like the echo of empire's end. Duo squadron sally to seize the confines commune, coevorden, corps corps in the cobble's cruel clutch, to command the viaduct to the Vec Canal. At 6:25 a.m., cannonades croon crescendos to a crescendo of chaos. Our divisional slight field forges fuse the phrase fugue with a frenzy of 105 mm thunder. Bomber echelons rumble rolls o'erhead like the roll of Ragnarok's drums. The birds bank westward with wings whistling like witches' wails. A machine gun's manic staccato, the inaugural upbeat, auguring an arduous aurora that aches with anticipation. The juvenile morn mesmerizes the mead with a magic all its own. The May meadows moist with matutinal mist that clings like a lover's breath. Soul shafts transmute the flatly fogging flatlands to undulating aureate oceans rippling with the promise of plunder. Magisterial dray destriers dance across the dale in a dappled dream, neighing to their russet remounts with a nicker that nips the nerves. Nigh, a marching cavalry column crests the confine like a crimson wave, a Messerschmitt meanders. O'er our heads with a Me 109's metallic mule, a cavalcade on clay and cloud, earth and ether entwined. Ere we espy the end of the enigma, we've eeled through entanglements interstices like shadows through a sieve. The Vect viaduct vibrates under the squadron stomp, a symphony of steel-shod hooves on stone. We witness the premier Dutch directives in faded fresco. Boatmen and sabots stand stupefied afore their abodes of ochre thatch and oak, roused from repose, roused rudely, abrupt by the rumble of our approach. Holland. We're in Holland, camaraden. Didst thou detect the dialect's Dutch twang? Is this soldiery's serendipity, or the god's own jest? Each footfall ferries us fleet to Tommy's threshold. Cannon consort into casements carved from the canal's curve. Reconnoiters rocket to the regiment's van with the velocity of Valkyries. We two, Renata and I, cannot convoy the cohort in their canter. We canter along the Vecht viaduct, void of vitriol or volley. We woo Dutch witnesses, who wax oniric with optics agape like fish on a fly line. A yeoman yields the Germanic hail with a hesitant hand half raised, savoring the zephyr only an equestrian. Espies, crisp with a scent of salt and sedge, we canter carefree in the crisp cockcrow's caress, letting the alluring acreage allure us with its amber acres and alder-fringed avenues. Scant souls stir in the Sabbath serenity, though 'tis Friday's fretful fall. Renata riles restless, her ribs rising like bellows. I scarce restrain her with reins raw in my raw palms. The battalion's been 500 meters astern like a lagging shadow. Renata recoils from repose, quite contrary. She imposes her imperative with a toss of her mane that mocks my mastery. I cannot counter her course, wheeling wild as a will-o'-the-wisp. Renata's cajolery cures naught, cooing and clucking like a crooner to a crowd. Beast, blasted beast of burden, whither wag thou thy rider through this rival realm? We're in adversary's ambit, a half-hour in antagonist's ambit. Ponder it like a paladin's pledge, Renata. Hoppida, hoppida, hoppida. I goad Renata to gallop with spurs that spark like stars on her flanks. I vow, I vanquish thee to my volition, with a vow voiced in the vernacular of the Vienna riding school, and quest per binding's equestrian edict, for a beloved to clasp thy ostensibly suggestible psyche like a lover's locket. But thou hast none, heartless hack of horseflesh from the Hanoverian Harris, thou perturbing pony of the Pampas. Doth the pressure of my haunch horrify thee, thou trembling Titan? Thou quiverest like a quail in the queen's quill, but I am no Placidity's paragon, no placid Palomino. The timber on the trail flits like in a frontier flick of flickering phantoms. Halt, halt, thou headstrong harlot. Oh la la, behold, they tender a toll for us, tolling a tocsin for us, with trumpets triumphant blare. Astern in vanguard, we glimpse the mounted cavalry cohort, cresting the crest, Oberleutnant Graf G. at their gallant gallop. Oh, if solely he spies us in our solitary sprint. Zoom, 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 like Zephyrus on the Zephyr. The premier foe's fire rends the ranks of riders like a reaper's ruthless rake. The chargers churn chaotic, cantering to cover hind homesteads of half-timbered haven. Renata snorts with a snort that startles the swallows. She's already sought sanctuary in a spinny shadow. Renata reveals she's a native patrol pony who navigates not astray by beastman bond, a paragon of the Prussian parade ground's pedigree. Renata reifies the robust ritual chant, a fabled firearm that festers youthful despite the diesel's dirge, no matter the motor's mutter of mechanical mockery. So concluded our inaugural foray of riding gainst England, a rite of passage etched in the ether. Frederick Sort on the march to the coast, May 11th, 10 a.m. Amid hasty hegira through North Holland's nebulous nooks of neat polders and prim pastures, our cavalry claims a clement cessation this cockcrow. In one diurnal diptych and nocturnal nebula, we traversed 120 kilometers, an exceptional equestrian epic that eclipsed even the epic of El Alamein. Today portends another 90 kilometers odyssey of Oerland outreach. We inhale for the ordeal ahead, drawing deep the damp Dutch air laced with the tang of tidal flats, and introspect our tempestuous yesterday, where the thunder of hooves had hushed the horizon. The terrain to our vanguard vexes the vanguard with its vexing V of waterways. The myriad West Frisian flumes, densely daubed one adjacent another like a Dutch master's meticulous map, afford horsemen scarce scope to splay for a sweeping sidearm assault. Squadrons squeezed like sardines in a silver straits. Graver still the gratuitous gaps and spans that grate the ground's geometry. Viaducts vaporized in veils of volcanic vapor. Again and again, viaducts vanish in volcanic veils after. Antagonist arsonists allow us approach along a canal within 100 meters, their fuses fizzing like festive fireworks. Decades of detonations we've divined. Blast billows blooming like ebony evergreens on the Empyrean edge, silhouetted against the sea's slate shimmer. Naturally, our audacious arms and arm-to-arm affrays have annexed abutments and eased our egress with the ease of eagles on the updraft. In Hughaven they hove to tardy estuarive, arriving as the ashes cooled. As we wended the waterway's winding way, we witnessed the domicile's facades fractured by feckless fusillades of their own frantic folly. Dutch denizens have drunk deepest war's dregs by zeal of their own zapper zealots, who zapped their own ziggurats in zealous zephyrs. The antagonist absents enters in Hoogeven. We noted the fastnesses in this burg were wholly wastrel, their walls weeping with the wet of their own waste. The Netherlander nails neatly nobles, niftier than the Polac's plotting ploy, posits the regimental regent to his regents with a wry wink. He's apposite. We harbor hands-on heuristic from yester at Coevorden, where the canal's chill current carried the cries of the cornered. The Netherlander nails nobly in fray, quad Dutch collegians conspicuously clogged duo of our squadrons at Coevorden till our mortars menaced their muster with a mortar's menacing moan. We prize pugilism's prowess. Pity the Dutch, how they heedlessly hazard their own holdings in a holocaust of their own hasty hand. The antagonist has adeptly disseminated distrust with his demagoguery, dropping leaflets like locusts on the Low Countries. the trepid townsfolk tarry in their tenements, truanting there. Tillage with trembling hands, terrorized that Teutons might torch their thatch in tit-for-tat. In counterpoint, we chronicle cheerfully chronicles, where folk fate us fervently and fraternally, filling our flasks with Frisian fire-water. Our hostelry's hostess proffered potent potable, dark beer drawn from oaken barrels in the cellar's cool crypt, and beckoned us to board with benevolent banter, her blue eyes bright with the bittersweet brew of reluctant relief. Today we vault the vast vault to the verge. We wot not what ward the antagonist has woven for us in his watery web. We wot not whither he will waylay in the willow's whisper. Our squadrons have sundered deeply into the domain devoid antagonist encounter. We waver o'er what we will woo, whether windmills wheeling in the west or waves whispering warnings. We unfurl the folio of our fledgling fancy. They flaunt fanciful Holland. Windmills whirling whimsical on dike-top dales, lanes luminous with light lancing through linden leaves, alluring ample-egged edifices with gables gawking like gossiping gossips, clopping clogs on cobbles, curved by centuries. The undulating ermine cowls of countrywomen swaying like swans on the Zaan's serene surface. Beholding the burg a singular sod, before bedazzled optics, fulfills a juvenile jaunt we juggled in Judgeon's jamboree. We feel forlorn to fancy that all appertains to the foe. These folk with their flat vowels and fervent folk songs. These folk have nigh the nomenclature as ours, Godmorgen, a guttural echo of Guten Morgen. Should they be our adversaries? Nay, and nay again 1,000 times neen. The sentiment that we sojourn on our singular Teutonic terrain throbs in us tyrannically, a tribal thrum from the Teutoburg's tangled taiga. The populace that peered at us today, peaked and polar as a pole's pout, is kin to us in the knot of their knotted brows. Their phrase, finesse, bold and ballistic as a burgher's burger ballad, conforms to our canon of calculated courage. Their caliber is our own, carved from the same Carpathian clay. This is the tragedy that throttles Holland like tenebrous tempests from thunderheads brewing over the Zuiderzee, where dikes defy the deluge but not destiny. We must be mutual malefactors when we're so akin in our angular architecture and amber ale. Yet have not Germanic gens always grappled in their own grim grapples? Hildebrand and Hagebrand, twixt duo armies, trills an archaic annal of a duel of dense blood kinsmen, swords singing the saga of siblings sundered by strife. Yester we interred duo of our dragoons in West Friesland's fallow furrows, nigh their blood brethren from the opposing outfit, the earth still echoing with the enemy's expiring gasps. Duo comrades who cantered with us yester silently sojourn in sodden silence. We wound, but we withhold hate, our hearts heavy as howitzers. We muse ahead, we mount gainst England with the momentum of the muse. The vanguard cavalry cadre is fortified with fleet field pieces, ferried from the fatherland's foundries. Most of the men mount through Frederick Sort's fog-fringed fields. What will the diurnal dispense? Dawn's dark daughter? Victory and vanguard are our vigil's vow, etched in the eagle's eye. During the advance Sealand, May 11th, 6 p.m., our vast vault vaults victorious. Today's tardy twilight, our cavalry crests the Dutch North Sea's nautical nave, the salt spray stinging like the sting of success, an astounding equestrian epic that eclipses the epics of Eldorettas. Rider and roan reached the remote rendezvous with the rhythm of runes. Today we traversed 90 to 100 kilometers through tulip-tufted tulip fields and tidy townships. Only one who's once straddled a saddle savors the splendor of the stride, sinews singing with the song of the steppe, a bold behest burgeons bedrock, blooming like the broom of Brabant. Our horsemen hailed the horizon's hearth from the North Sea's nautical nave, waves waving whitecaps like welcoming wives. We wooed a lucky diurnal that dawned docile at 6:30 a.m., the mist melting like a maiden's reserve. We wended with renewed rigor through Frederick Sort's fragrant fringes, Nordwald's neat nooks, to the broad Zuiderzee that lures from Meppel's misty mills to Leeuwarden's luminous locks. A stimulating saunter in the matutinal mist led us through lush leas, where lustrous livestock lounged like lords on velvet verges, Frisian cows with coats like cloaks of cream. We scarce sense the sinews strained from yester in our equines, their flanks flecked with the froth of fond remembrance. Our leaders longed mainly to lock our line of ligation, to lame antagonist limbing with lures of lightning. Their conclave convened in a cafe in Hygim's hushed hall, the air a-whirl with the aroma of anise and apple strudel. The billiard board burgeoned the battle board like a Baedeker's blueprint. The officers' o'er orders o'er-looped upright in unyielding unity. In minutes our locus and labors were lucid as a lens, the regimental regent ruling the rearing of a motorized vanguard with the resolve of a Roman road builder. The motorized moiety of the division was withdrawn and winged with a whimsical warrant to the west. Most of our masses must muster Macum, and bolsward by eventide. The horses hounded to their hindmost hoof in a haze of heroic haste. It has to be, fretted the Führer in his fretful foresight, meeting the march mileage with a mapmaker's meticulousness. Omnibuses ought o'ertake cavalry cursorily to the coast's cruel curl. Our armored explorers will be dispatched to Akram's ambiguous avenues. We will wrest the waterways and weirs that our opponents might marshal to man the moat, their locks like the locks of Loki. In no nonce they could deluge a deep swath of polder plain from Zwola's ziggurat spires to Steenwijk's steadfast steads. We were likewise levied to lasso all launches, lighters, and luggers lurking in the lagoons, a missive murmurs to the mandarin from the mist. Armored explorers encountered antagonist on Akram Egress Road. Duo antagonist omnibuses obliterated in a blaze of blue murder. We instantly impel heavy motorized munitions, at high haste o'er the clinkered chaussee to Akram, lee of Leeuwarden's luminous locks. The indwellers of Akram are agitated and aghast, their faces frozen in frames of fright. They don't divine what's doing in the dawn's dim dance. 10 kilometers to the north we nudge toward duo damaged omnibuses that stand aslant on the street like slain sentinels. The lord of the armored explorers, Meister Sergeant R., who reaped the Ritterkreuz first class in Poland's powdery plains, where his panzer punched through Pieterkau's palisades, recounts what wrought with a warrior's wry wit. At noon we left here in Wien. A few Dutch denizens there queried if we were verily English soldiery, their tulip-tended terraces trembling. There. Astonishment at our aspect was beyond belief, brows beetled like the barges on the Zon. We roared along the chaussee to Akram. Suddenly we spied the luminary of tourist omnibuses blinking before us like bewildered fireflies. We hove within 50 meters. We recognized Dutch dragoons in drab. They sprinted from the buses, seeking succor from our machine guns' gale and trenches on both borders of the boulevard, turf torn by their terror. Our trio armored explorers roared at full frenzy toward the omnibuses, engines elegizing empire. One of our vehicles was unable to arrest and rammed the foremost omnibus with a crunch like crumbling croissants. The bus charioteer clung to the helm and tried to thwart us by barricading the boulevard aslant with his bus, a barricade of bravado. We battered down the driver with a barrage that belied our brotherhood. We bayed 10 Dutch dragoons and wounded many more in the melee's merciless maw. The other omnibuses roared off like routed rabbits. We drove forthwith to the Akram Egress Road to safeguard the spans against sabotage. Suddenly duo shots from a howitzer fluidus, flat trajectory fury. We pulled back, trying to fog o'er what we were doing with a faint's finesse. The good burghers of Akram misunderstood as we rapidly fogged the roads behind us with a fog of forgotten fears. The people fled into their houses, screaming gas. In a gas-lit panic, we got the omnibuses. They still ran like rabbits on rails. We garnered this graft while wafting our cavaliers to the fore. We found an antagonist salary script in an omnibus. The Leeuwarden and Garrison's gilder-gleaned graft. 12 Dutch guilders for the feckless foray to foil our advance. A fool's fiefdom frittered. Gust on the Zuiderzee Highway, May 12th, 1 a.m. At midnight we can couch calmly. We cull our cogitations and conceits, cogitate a jot after a diurnal duel that dawned with dew and dusk with dust. I crave a cloistered chamber, a corner carved from the clamor. I'd relish repast, a roast rare as repose. We remark to the respectable relict of Butcher J. Van Boer, her face framed by the firelight's flickering frame. We neglect not the wonted well-mannered mode in the Netherlandic nomenclature, that Nasal nuance of northern neighbors. If you please, madam, a morsel for men made mighty by March. She wavers like a willow in the wind, weighs us warily with widow's wisdom, and wafts us upward to the under-attic's umbra, stairs creaking like confessions. She unlatches a leaf with a latches-like click. Trio tiny tots lie in the locus, thickly thronged in their trifling truckle bed, limbs limp as lilies in a lullaby. A second sash swings on squeaky hinges, unveiling the selfsame scene save. Quartet juveniles, their breaths a soft symphony. Third portal parts with a parting sigh. Again a cradle crammed with cherubs, cherubic cheeks flushed with the fever of forgotten dreams. In the passageway we perceive half-grown heirs huddled in heaps, all a-slumber in sanctified somnolence, the air a aura of innocence amid invasion's ink. Okay, we'll pine with the optimism of officers off duty. We'll oust the typewriter on a trunk and tap tenderly so as not to trouble any tender tyke. No need. She nods with a neighborly nod, and quad pairs of progeny orbs ogle the outland uncle soldier from their rumpled realms, rubescence of repose in the rouged roué's rounded cheeks. None of these hail Halflings howls or hurls a huff. We weave a web of wordless warmth at first glance, a fleeting fraternity forged in the flicker. They murmur. As I murmur in Morse of the mind, I halt a heartbeat to hark the horizon beyond the half-open casement, beyond the boulevard, scant meters from the homestead's haunch-hewn of honest oak. I inspect across the WWII, that vast vapid vat of the void. The astral azure flickers o'er the aqueous abyss like fireflies on the fjord. I heed the hurrying hush of waves from the silken surf, sighing secrets to the shingle. The rudely roused rugrats repose anew in a rustle of quilts. I can continue clacking. On the carriages, click, the keys kissing paper like a kiss in the kitchen. We hearken the heraldic broadcasts at midnight's mournful mantle. After trio diurnals, we fathom what's fomenting in the firmament of the fray. Our fulminating fleet to the coast, through sleek serpentine streets, lures us to the antagonist anters, Conwick and scant kilos afar, their casemates crouching like craving crabs. We can scarce snare our sinew for the strain, scarce swallow the suspense. Asterisk diurnals later. The motorized moiety of our cavalry division, post-probe with our armored autos that prowled like panthers in the pre-dawn pall, marches from Havelt's hushed hollows, Nijmeppel's misty mills, Drent Domain's damp dales. We wend through Nordwald's neat nooks, here in Veen, where the Veen's verdant vale veiled our vanguard. Akram's ambiguous avenues, earn some sneak through Sneak's snug squares, a bolsward to the instant vicinity of the vicinage of Macam M. Iselmere. WWII, at 12:10 p.m., duo special squads roll through Welgeligen in duo garnered omnibuses, arriving at the WWII highway like uninvited guests at a Guildhall gala. To Macam is impossible, destroyed by our adversaries, posits Captain Saint, lord of a naval nucleus with a nautical nod and a nautical nose for nautical nonsense. Both special squad leaders are in Bolsward. By eventide you must veer southward and vault another via to Macam, veering like Vikings on a vendetta. We can corral all the craft immediately in Macam and Pyram, pinnaces and prams plying the polders.